You may have heard the word popcorn tea or seen pictures of tea leaves mixed with popcorn, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions. No, this is not a tea made out of pieces of popcorn, but it is Genmaicha, a delicious green tea that is loved by many around the world. In this video, we're going to explain what Genmaicha is, how it's made, and what you can use it for. Before we get started, it would really mean a lot to us if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay tuned for future tea videos. We have hundreds of videos on all sorts of topics related to Japanese green tea, but for this episode, we're going to focus on Genmaicha specifically. Without further ado, let's get started. What is Genmaicha? Genmaicha is the most popular type of blended tea in Japan. As you may all know, all teas have to come from the tea plant, Camellia sinensis, otherwise they are not considered a true tea. Blended teas are made by combining tea leaves with other ingredients, and they still can be considered teas. Genmaicha is made by combining green tea leaves with toasted rice, and it has a very unique flavor to it that a lot of people like. Genmaicha has more of these warm cereal flavors, a hint of nuttiness, warm toast, and even a bit of popcorn. This flavor is not actually why Genmaicha is called popcorn tea. The real reason has to do with the appearance. When you look at certain types of Genmaicha green tea, you may notice little white pieces that look like popcorn. This is a Genmaicha green tea with roasted rice that is popped in the same way that corn kernels pop. When you prepare a Genmaicha green tea with roasted rice that has popped, it doesn't change the flavor a whole lot, but you still get this subtle popcorn flavor from the Genmaicha tea. This unique flavor comes from the starches and the sugars in the genmai, or toasted rice, as they are released into the water. Let's discuss how these grains of roasted rice are produced and how they are integrated into the Genmaicha tea. How is Genmaicha made? First there are the tea leaves, and then there is the genmai, or toasted rice. Let's first talk about how the toasted rice is made. To make genmai, only white rice is used. This is the same type of rice they use to make mochi, or rice dough. The reason white rice is used is because brown rice is encased in a protective hull that seals in the starches inside. To produce white rice, this hull is removed and the starch inside can be roasted much more easily. Apparently when you have a Genmaicha green tea with roasted rice that is brown, there is much less flavor and fragrance. To prepare the rice for roasting, it is first soaked and then later steamed. Next, the rice has to be dried, and the main way to do this is to blow hot air underneath it. Finally, the rice is ready to be roasted, and depending on the heat, some of these grains of rice can pop, just like popcorn. The rice is then cooled and added to the tea leaves. The tea leaves are made from the older leaves and stems of the tea plant. These are the least expensive tea leaves, used for teas like bancha and hojicha, but there are plenty of benefits to them actually. First off, they are higher in minerals and they are thought to help with digestion. This is why a lot of people drink bancha tea after a meal. Also, these more mature leaves tend to be lower in caffeine. Caffeine is produced as a defense mechanism to protect against insects, and because these older leaves are tougher, the tea plant doesn't need to produce as much in order to protect them. This makes teas like Genmaicha great for the afternoon or evening. Finally, the flavor of older tea leaves tends to pair well with the toasted rice. These more earthy or wooden notes work well with the nutty flavors that come from the rice. The leaves and rice work together to produce the wonderful tea known as Genmaicha. As we mentioned before, most Genmaicha tea is made from bancha leaves, but there are a few different types that we can talk about. The different types of Genmaicha are determined by what is used in addition to the toasted rice. Normal Genmaicha. Normal Genmaicha tea is made out of the older leaves and stems of the tea plant. While the flavors of the fresh young leaves tend to be sweeter and more vegetal, the older leaves have slightly more of these earthy notes and more minerality. These leaves tend to complement the nutty and cereal flavors of the roasted rice, so the combination works great. Sencha Genmaicha. Sencha Genmaicha tea is made with toasted rice and sencha leaves. These younger leaves tend to clash a bit with the flavors of the toasted rice, but it is still a great tea if you're a fan of sencha. This tea will be slightly more expensive because it uses the younger leaves and it will be higher in caffeine than a normal Genmaicha tea. Gyokuro Genmaicha. Gyokuro Genmaicha is made by combining Gyokuro leaves with toasted rice. These leaves are not only made from the youngest sprouts of the tea plant, but they are also shaded for 3 weeks before the harvest to maximize their content of theanine. This tea will be much sweeter, much more expensive, and much higher in caffeine than a regular Genmaicha tea. Hoji Genmaicha. Hoji Genmaicha, as you can probably tell from the name, is made out of roasted tea leaves and toasted rice. The flavors of the roasted tea leaves and the toasted rice tend to complement one another, but it definitely takes the tea into a darker direction. This tea will be very low in caffeine, and as we learned from the farmers at Zenkoan, this tea is actually used in hospitals and for children because it's so low in caffeine. Matcha Genmaicha. This is the Matcha Genmaicha made by combining toasted rice, green tea leaves, and green tea powder. This Matcha Genmaicha produces an incredibly green infusion as the matcha powder fills the water. This can be a more flavorful tea overall, but the downside is that it takes away from the flavor of the toasted rice because the matcha powder is so strong. How was Genmaicha first invented? There are a few different stories about how Genmaicha was first invented, and no one really knows for sure. One legend starts with one man from Kyoto dropping pieces of his rice cake, and rather than throwing it away, he tried it in his tea and liked the flavor. However Genmaicha was invented, it doesn't change the fact that it is an important tea in Japan. It has sometimes been used used during times of economic hardship as a way to make tea last longer, as rice tends to be more inexpensive. It is also used for certain types of fasting, as the flavor of the tea can simulate a warm bowl of rice. What are the benefits of Genmaicha? Although Genmaicha is considered to be a cheaper Japanese green tea, there are many benefits to it. As we just mentioned, Genmaicha tea can be great when you're fasting because the flavor can be very satiating without having any calories. Another benefit to Genmaicha is that it has very little caffeine in it. The older tea leaves and stems are low in caffeine to begin with, but the caffeine content is brought down even further by the addition of the toasted rice. Finally, Genmaicha tends to be a tea that is very forgiving to both the producer as well as the person preparing it. It is difficult to prepare a bad Genmaicha tea, so when you find it at a cafe or coffee shop, it can sometimes be the safest bet. Even some cheaper Genmaicha teas still have a pleasant rice flavor to them. The tea can also stand up to hotter temperatures, so it is more forgiving if you use water that is too hot. This can be useful when you're ordering the tea at a cafe, as they will more than likely bring it out with water that is close to boiling. How do you prepare Genmaicha tea? When it comes to preparing Genmaicha tea, it can be quite simple. The tea is less sensitive to temperature and brewing time, and it can produce a lot of flavor even if you don't get the brewing right. We recommend taking 5 grams of Genmaicha green tea and putting it into a teapot. The flavor of Genmaicha can have a strong influence on the seasoning of the teapot itself, so you may want to have a designated Genmaicha teapot, or at the very least use a glazed teapot. If you use an unglazed teapot, it will be difficult to get the flavor of the Genmaicha tea out when it comes to brewing other types of teas. Next, you can add the water in. There are 2 different brewing methods for Genmaicha. The first is to brew it just like you would a normal bancha or hojicha, with 175 degrees Fahrenheit or 80 degrees Celsius water and a brewing time of 1 minute. The other method of brewing Genmaicha tea is more of a flash brew, with near boiling water and a steeping time of 20 seconds. Either way, you should use approximately 150 milliliters of water or a little more than half a cup for the brewing. After the time is up, you can pour your Genmaicha tea into teacups. If you're preparing tea for multiple people, make sure you use the alternate pouring method. The last tea being poured out is usually the most flavorful, so you should divide it amongst you and your guests. One bonus of Genmaicha is that the flavor can last for many different steepings. Even after the tea leaves have released all their flavor, the toasted rice will continue to provide flavor in brewing after brewing, so you can really brew the Genmaicha 5 times or more before it runs out of flavor. Where can you buy Genmaicha? If you're interested in trying some Genmaicha tea, you can try some of our favorite, the Hoji Genmaicha. After traveling around Japan, we have met with dozens of different farmers and tried many different kinds of Genmaicha tea. Our favorite is this one produced by Hoji, a collection of tea farmers in Shizuoka that do some really great work. If you would like to support what we do and all the farmers in Japan that make it possible, it would really mean a lot to us if you could try out this tea and let us know what you think. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave us an email, comment, or message, and we'll respond to you as soon as we can. As we said before, it would really mean a lot to us if you could subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for our future tea videos. Until then, we'll see you next time.